This is the Great Pyramid of Giza, over 4,600 years old, still standing and holding secrets that have baffled historians for millennia. How did the ancient Egyptians move 50-ton stones without modern machines? Today, we're uncovering three of the most fascinating theories behind its construction. Welcome to History in a Nutshell. Treasure hunters stripped it. British explorers blasted their way inside with dynamite. Even Mr. Beast filmed the challenge here. And yet, the pyramid still stands. Its construction is mind-bending. 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 50 tons. A structure so heavy, it remains one of the greatest man-made achievements ever. Its base covers the area of 7 New York City blocks and is almost perfectly level off by less than an inch. Each side is aligned almost perfectly with the 4 cardinal directions. Thousands of years before the invention of the compass. And here's the crazy part. We still don't know exactly how it was built, so we recreated the entire thing, and today, we're breaking down 3 of the most fascinating theories behind its construction. This is the unbelievable engineering of the Great Pyramid. Meet Khufu, the pharaoh who ordered this masterpiece. Ruler of the richest civilization on earth, and considered a living god. He believes he will exist forever, so he needs a home worthy of immortality. It has to be unbreakable, secure enough to hold all his treasures, and breathtaking enough to reflect his divine status. His father, Sneferu, also worshipped as a god, lies in this pyramid. He was the king who taught Egypt how to build these massive structures. But even his pyramids have flaws. A bend here, a miscalculation there. Khufu wants perfection. He wants to surpass his father, to lift Egypt's spirits after Sneferu's death, and to unite the nation behind the most ambitious construction project humanity had ever attempted. And if he succeeds, the world will remember his name for thousands of years. A project as massive as the Great Pyramid could only come from a nation rich, powerful, and insanely well organized. And ancient Egypt was exactly that, thanks to the Nile. Every year, the river flooded and left behind layers of fertile soil. That natural cycle produced huge harvests, enough to feed the entire workforce and support a full-time army. And that army didn't just sit around, they marched into neighboring lands, taking wealth, resources, and prisoners for the pharaoh. So when Khufu decides he wants the most extravagant monument ever built, the money is already there. But wealth alone won't build a wonder of the world. Khufu needs a mastermind, someone brilliant enough to design a monument fit for a god. Enter Hemiunu, Khufu's half-brother, a once-in-a-generation architect. He isn't just following in the footsteps of Khufu's father. He's determined to surpass him on every level. Hemiunu imagines a pyramid unlike anything Egypt has ever seen. Bigger, more complex, more secure. A true leap forward in architecture. His plan calls for an enormous structure made almost entirely of solid stone. Inside, 3 burial chambers would sit at different levels, all connected by passageways. The first chamber is deep underground, just in case Khufu dies early in the project. The second chamber is hidden behind a decoy wall to fool tomb robbers. And leading to the highest chamber is the incredible Grand Gallery, a steep, towering corridor with beautiful corbelled ceilings. At the top sits the king's chamber, Hemiunu's masterpiece. A huge room for its time, built from massive pink granite, blocks hauled all the way from Aswan. Each stone cut so perfectly that you couldn't fit a razor blade between them. Inside, a granite sarcophagus will one day hold Khufu himself. When the internal structure is done, the entire pyramid will be wrapped in polished white limestone blocks so smooth, it will shine like a beacon under the sun and glow under the moon. And finally, a gleaming golden capstone, the pyramidion, will crown the top. Only then will Khufu's eternal home be complete. But back in ancient Egypt, Hemiunu doesn't have time to chill. He needs this pyramid built fast, at least 1 burial chamber must be ready before Khufu dies. His target? Finishing the entire monument in about 20 years. He estimates the project will need roughly 25,000 workers, a massive chunk of Egypt's population of around 1 million. So the state launches a huge recruitment effort. How exactly did they organize the workforce? We don't know for sure. Historians have argued about this for centuries. New digs, new discoveries, and even accidental finds keep reshaping the debate. Some theories are backed by real archaeological evidence. Others are pure sci-fi nonsense, which we'll skip. We're focusing on 3 evidence-based theories scientists take seriously, ranked from easy to medium to hard. So imagine this. You and your coworkers have to haul a stone block as heavy as a double-decker bus 130 meters into the air. Your tools? Ropes, wooden sleds, and piles of rubble. The simplest solution is obvious. A giant ramp. Tie the stone, gather as many workers as you can, and pull. As the pyramid gets taller, you just extend or raise the ramp. No magic tech. No aliens, just muscle and engineering. This external ramp idea is the classic explanation Egyptologists have backed for decades. And there's tons of proof that the Egyptians used large ramps on other projects. But here's the issue. Nobody agrees on what the ramp actually looked like. After a certain height, the whole concept starts to break down. A 2-ton block takes about 12 workers to drag uphill. As the pyramid grows, the ramp must either become steeper or a lot longer. You want a gentle slope, otherwise workers burn out instantly. Ancient laborers weren't superhuman. Most were in average health, and many didn't live past 40 from the brutal physical strain. Engineers calculated that 8% is the steepest incline that normal workers could handle. To reach the pyramid's full height of 147 meters with that gentle slope, the ramp would need to stretch over a kilometer and use millions of tons of material, more than the pyramid itself. We found no trace of such a mega ramp, and building it would take decades that Khufu simply didn't have. So what if the Egyptians went vertical? One idea is a spiral ramp wrapping around the pyramid like a mountain road. As the pyramid rises, the ramp loops around it and eventually gets integrated into the structure. That would explain the lack of surviving ramp. Remains pretty clever, right? Sort of. But the spiral design creates a new nightmare. Surveying the pyramid's faces must stay at exactly 51.9 from base to tip. Surveyors had to constantly check the edges to keep everything aligned. Even a tiny error at the bottom could create a massive mistake at the top. A spiral ramp blocks the builder's line of sight, making precise measurements nearly impossible. And the Great Pyramid is not crooked, it's unnervingly perfect. Which means the spiral ramp, while imaginative, has some serious flaws. Now we arrive at theory 2. It's the late 1990s. A French engineer named Jean-Pierre Houdin is watching a TV documentary about the pyramids. The program explains construction using the classic external ramp theory. But Henry isn't convinced. To his engineer's eye, the math just doesn't add up. So he calls his son Jean-Pierre Houdin, an architect, and asks what he thinks. Jean-Pierre gets hooked instantly. Despite knowing almost nothing about ancient Egypt, and without ever having visited the Great Pyramid, he starts sketching alternative solutions. That's what begins as curiosity turns into a full-blown obsession. For years, he models, calculates, revises, until he finally presents his idea to Egyptologists. Most of them dismiss him immediately. He's not part of the academic circle, and Egyptology is a notoriously tough field for outsiders. But over time, Houdin's theory starts gaining real traction because he approaches the puzzle like Hemiunu himself, thinking through every tiny detail. His model could even explain how the Egyptians moved the massive granite beams without needing a team of 600 people. Here's the short version. Hemiunu does use an external ramp, but only for the lower part of the pyramid, up to about 60 meters high. And it's not a crude rubble ramp, it's built from cut limestone blocks, the same blocks that would later form the pyramid's upper layers. That would explain why no huge ramp ruins were ever found. The ramp literally became part of the pyramid. This shorter ramp would let workers build the wide lower levels and haul the enormous granite beams needed for the king's chamber. But here's the problem: trying to coordinate hundreds of workers. Pulling a 50-ton block in a tight space is basically a logistical nightmare. So Houdin proposes something brilliant. Hemiunu may have used the pyramid's Grand Gallery as a massive counterweight system. The Grand Gallery sits directly opposite, where the external ramp would have been almost like it was deliberately positioned for this purpose. Its extreme height, narrow width, and the strange stone ledges lining both sides have baffled archaeologists for decades. But in Houdin's theory, the Grand Gallery is essentially the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a giant mechanical lift. Those stone benches? They're rails. Rails for heavy sleds riding on wooden rollers, because remember, the Egyptians didn't have wheels. By loading a counterweight on one end and letting gravity pull it down the gallery, the system could help lift the granite beams up the opposite side toward the king's chamber. In other words, the Grand Gallery might have been an ancient industrial machine hidden inside the pyramid. So here's how the system works in Houdin's model. At the base of the external ramp, workers position a massive granite block. That block is tied by ropes to a wooden trolley sitting at the top of the Grand Gallery, loaded with smaller stones to make it extremely heavy. When the trolley races down the Grand Gallery, its weight pulls the granite block up the external ramp. A giant counterweight elevator, ancient Egypt style, and there's even physical evidence to support this idea: markings and scuffing inside. The Grand Gallery that looked like something heavy slid through it repeatedly. So this theory actually explains why the corridor is shaped the way it is, and what it might have been used for. Once the giant granite beams for the king's chamber are finally lifted into place, the external ramp has done its job. But by this point, the pyramid is getting too tall for an outside ramp to remain efficient. So the builders switch strategies. They dismantle the external ramp and reuse those limestone blocks, this time to craft an internal spiral ramp that runs inside the pyramid's walls. Picture the inside of a parking garage, with sloped driveways climbing up level by level. This interior ramp would begin at the base and rise at about a 7% incline. It goes straight upward until it hits the inner face of the pyramid, makes a sharp left turn, then continues up the next side at the same incline. This zigzagging pattern continues all the way up, with each ramp section getting shorter as the pyramid becomes narrower near the top. From bottom to peak, the internal ramp would total over 1 kilometer in length. Pulling heavy limestone blocks up a gentle slope is totally doable, especially with sleds sliding across smooth stone. But at every corner, workers face one brutal challenge: pivoting massive blocks around a tight turn without dropping or damaging them. Houdin calculated that the internal ramp couldn't have been more than about 3 meters wide. That meant workers would need extra room at each turn to rotate the massive blocks. So he proposed that at the end of every ramp segment, the builders left a large open space, a mini-work platform, where laborers could pivot each stone using wooden levers or simple cranes. It also would have doubled as a spot for workers to take a breather before tackling the next incline. And here's the interesting part. There is physical evidence that matches this idea. A mysterious notch on the pyramid around 83 meters up lines perfectly with the kind of turning platform Houdin predicted. Houdin's combined theories, the Grand Gallery counterweight system and the internal ramp, offer surprisingly solid answers to 2 big questions. How were 2-ton blocks raised so high? And how were 50-ton granite beams moved without enough space for hundreds of workers? But if he's right, the internal ramp would have required incredibly careful planning. Its path would need to weave upward without crashing into any chambers or passageways inside the pyramid. That level of complexity is exactly why some archaeologists remain skeptical. Critics argue there isn't enough direct evidence, or that it's simply too complicated compared to the straightforward external ramp idea. But here's the thing: ancient Egyptian engineering was astonishingly precise. They mastered stonework, alignment, astronomy, and massive construction. So why not consider a more advanced internal ramp system too? And for that matter, why not explore an even more sophisticated explanation? In 2024, news headlines everywhere claimed the mystery of the pyramids had finally been solved thanks to new archaeological discoveries. And the surprising key to the whole puzzle might actually be the Nile River today. The Giza Plateau is a dry stretch of desert sitting kilometers away from the Nile's edge. But 4,500 years ago, the landscape may have looked completely different. A 2024 study used radar satellite scans and deep soil analysis to map ancient underground features. What researchers found was incredible: evidence of a lost branch of the Nile that once flowed right past the pyramid complexes. If that's true, the Egyptians could have transported enormous stone blocks directly to the base of the pyramids by boat instead of dragging them across miles of desert from distant. It's pretty believable that the ancient Egyptians used the Nile's waterways to move massive stone blocks horizontally across the desert. But that still leaves the big question: how did they lift those stones upward? In 2024, another peer-reviewed study dropped a surprisingly bold idea. It suggests that the Egyptians might have used hydraulic power, basically a water-powered elevator to raise heavy blocks. Now, that might sound like something straight from a conspiracy forum, and for years, professional Egyptologists treated ideas like this as pure fantasy. Cool to imagine? Sure. Backed by evidence? Not really. Until possibly now, a team of hydrologists, engineers, and geographers found signs that one of the earliest Egyptian pyramids might have been built using a floating wooden lift. This device could raise stones with far less manpower than traditional hauling. Here's how this ancient elevator would have worked. Rainwater and seasonal floodwater get collected in a reservoir. Like a mini dam, underground channels funnel that water into a vertical shaft running up through the pyramid's core, kind of like a water-filled chimney. Inside that shaft floats a large wooden platform. Workers place stone blocks onto the platform at ground level by opening and closing valves. They add or drain water in the shaft. Now, changing the water level makes the platform rise or sink, just like an elevator powered by buoyancy. According to the study, this system could lift stones up to 17 meters high. Workers would unload the blocks at the top of the shaft and essentially build the pyramid from the inside out. The lead researcher even argues this might explain why later pyramids became smaller. As Egypt's climate dried over time, they simply didn't have enough water to keep such a system running. Without hydraulic help, builders had to fall back on one thing: raw human muscle. So, does this theory actually hold water? Most Egyptologists aren't convinced. Zahi Hawass, basically the most famous Egyptologist alive, says the study is completely wrong. The pyramid examined in the research is much smaller than Khufu's Great Pyramid, built differently and made from lighter stones. So even if a water elevator worked for that structure, scaling it up for the Great Pyramid would require something far larger and more complex. And so far, archaeologists haven't found any shaft in Khufu's pyramid that matches this idea. On the other hand, ramps show up everywhere in Egyptian archaeological sites. For that reason, most scholars still believe that some type of ramp system, whether straight, zigzagging, internal, or multiple small ramps around the sides, remains the most realistic explanation. But here's the truth. There's still no universally accepted answer. Every year someone claims they've finally solved the mystery. But until hard evidence shows up, all these ideas remain possibilities, not certainties. And that's what makes the Great Pyramid so endlessly fascinating. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the final survivor of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Everything else, the Hanging Gardens, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Colossus of Rhodes, is long gone. But the Great Pyramid is still standing, still, towering over the desert, still daring us to explain how it was built. That's how old it is. When Cleopatra ruled Egypt, the pyramid was already ancient to her. She lived closer in time to us than to the pyramid's construction. But what's even stranger is what we haven't found. The ancient Egyptians documented everything. We're talking tax receipts, grain inventories, medical prescriptions, love letters, and yes, even receipts for donkey feed from 4,000 years ago. Their civilization was obsessed with recording life on papyrus, and yet not a single blueprint, drawing, or official plan for the pyramids has ever been discovered. No schematics, no construction notes, no design scrolls showing how they transported, lifted, or arranged millions of stone blocks. So what happened? Were the plans lost? Hidden? Destroyed on purpose? Or did the Egyptians simply build something this enormous without ever writing the instructions down? We don't know. But what modern science is uncovering might be even more shocking. The mysterious void inside the pyramid. In 2017, a team of scientists used cutting-edge particle physics, specifically muon scanning, a technique that maps structures using cosmic rays to peer inside the Great Pyramid without drilling or damaging it. What they found stunned the world. A huge, unexplained void hidden deep inside the structure. This wasn't a tiny cavity or a random crack. It was a chamber-sized empty space, large enough to fit a commercial airplane's fuselage, sitting right above the Grand Gallery. And here's the wild part. Nobody has ever entered it. We still have no idea what's inside. Researchers can't physically access it yet without risk of damaging the pyramid, so the mystery remains sealed in stone. What could the void be? Archaeologists are divided. Some say it's just structural, a relieving space, designed to prevent the pyramid from collapsing under its own weight. This would make it similar to the other known relieving chambers above the king's chamber. Others argue it supports Jean-Pierre Houdin's theory that the Great Pyramid used an internal counterweight system or an internal ramp, and the void is part of that mechanism. And then there's the most dramatic theory. Egypt's former head of antiquities, Zahi Hawass, suggests the void might actually be Khufu's true burial chamber, a secret room intentionally hidden from tomb robbers. Because here's another massive mystery. Khufu's mummy has never been found. Neither have his treasures. The king's chamber, we call his tomb. Many experts believe it wasn't his real resting place. If that's true, the Great Pyramid might still contain one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, untouched for 4,500 years. Whatever the void turns out to be, one thing is clear. We are nowhere near finished understanding the Great Pyramid. For a monument that survived wars, looters, earthquakes, and thousands of years of desert winds, it still guards its secrets tightly. And every new discovery, whether a hidden chamber, a forgotten canal of the Nile, or a new construction theory, only deepens the sense that the Great Pyramid isn't just a tomb. It's a puzzle that ancient Egypt left behind for us to solve. And that's the story of the Great Pyramid of Giza, ancient, mysterious, and still standing after more than 4,600 years. From Khufu's vision to Hemiunu's genius, and all the engineering marvels we still don't fully understand, the pyramid reminds us just how extraordinary human creativity can be. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of the Great Pyramid, make sure to subscribe to History in a Nutshell for more bite-sized journeys into the wonders of history. Hit that like button, leave a comment with your favorite pyramid theory, and don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an adventure through the past. Until next time, keep exploring and remember, history is full of surprises waiting to be discovered.